Welcome to What's in a Game, the podcast where Will and I get to celebrate 1 month of podcasting by talking about a Nuggets W. How are you
Yes,
doing today, Will?
I feel so great. What a win. What a game. I mean, you can't ask for anything more from that game. I'm like so wired from it all, staying up late and tweeting and reading reactions and watching reactions, and it's been awesome.
It has been, hasn't it? I haven't even fully gotten to bask in the all of the national media Nuggets apology tour takes that are inevitably happening today. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to taking some of those in after we record.
The national media reaction to the Nuggets is such a complicated kind of topic, like because I kind of come from respect Twitter and nobody respects the Nuggets, and it's kind of hard to argue it these days when Jokic is winning these MVPs with the media voting for him all the time. So from that perspective, I kind of get how fans would say Jokic does have so much support, but Dan Patrick made a good point today where it's like if the Nuggets had Boston or you know, LA across their chest, things would be a lot different. We understand that. So it's interesting, but I just want to get to the finals and win. So that's all I really care about right now.
Okay, well, I'm also about the narratives. And despite the fact that you and I had basically both written off the Nuggets after they went down 0-2, it is always fun to make fun of other people that did the same and to a really extreme degree. So after the Nuggets went down 0-2, it wasn't just writing off the Nuggets in the series like you and I had done. There was a lot of revisionist history about the Nuggets playoff run last year and Jokic's playoff run, and how it's they're always ready to bring out the you didn't face any like good teams on the way excuses, and Jokic is a fraud MVP. They're always waiting to pull out those arguments, and that's definitely not the direction, obviously, that you or I were going with it.
Hmm.
But it has been nice over the last two games as the Nuggets tied up the series to watch Jokic specifically play a hell of a lot better on both ends of the floor than he had in the rest of the playoffs, and
Hmm.
force those people to shut up.
Yeah, we kind of wrote them off, and I think it's fair of Nuggets fans to criticize the team. I'm always like a
Oh,
proponent of
absolutely.
criticizing the team. I don't really care if the team's not playing up to the standards that you're used to. Why not express that? I don't mind it. And the Nuggets didn't look like themselves, so you could buy into the narrative that Jamal was hurt or that the whole team was exhausted. And now they're responding, and that's what we wanted to see. Now this game was very emblematic of what I thought this series would look like as a whole. And we've gotten some weird games leading up to this point, but I expected the Wolves to struggle on offense just because they were ranked 17th in the regular season. They were ranked number one in the playoffs. And some of that may have to do with the Nuggets playing really bad and the Suns not putting much pressure on them. Yeah, now we have this good battle where both teams look strong, but they're playing to the trends that everyone kind of figured, where the Nuggets were going to be a good offense and we're going to be able to score despite Minnesota's defense. And this was kind of the kind of push and pull that I was hoping for. So,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think so even though this game was close, similar to game one in the final score, it never really got to a clutch game. So far the Wolves have won the only game that had clutch minutes in this series in game one. But the rest of this game did look a lot closer to what I expected in this series. I certainly didn't expect blowouts like in game two and game three on either side. But I expected the Wolves to bring a hellacious defensive effort like they did in game four, and certainly, obviously, in game two. But I expected the Nuggets to, figure it out and make it a game. And it very much felt like game three wasn't an outlier in terms of the Nuggets offense, just in terms of their process, because they were just really consistent in their ability and execution in generating good shots. And the only tough shots, with the exception of a ridiculous Kobe-esque mid-range fadeaway over Rudy by Aaron Gordon, the only tough shots that were taken and like late clock shot clock stuff was by Yoke and Jamal. And that's how it should be, right? The rest of the offense should be clicking in such a way that every possession like looked good, regardless of if the shot was made or not.
I mean, I wanted to ask you because I think there's going to be a narrative from opposing fans, and I think a lot of Nuggets fans, they'll be thinking about what the tough shot making means for the Nuggets and how sustainable it is because obviously AG, which we'll get to talking about him more specifically because he was probably the biggest story of the game for the Nuggets. But he had an amazing game that he typically doesn't do. I mean, we've seen him do all the things that he did in this game. We've seen him do it before. It's not like he can't do that, but to do it all
Right.
together like this in one package was pretty crazy. So, um, on the flip side of all these tough shots that Jamal was making and AG was making and Jokic was making, which we got shots from Justin Holiday and Christian Brown, but you don't get many shots from MPJ and KCP. So where we're lacking in production, we're making up for it in other ways. It is kind of surprising that a lot of it, not like a lot in volume, but just that some of it is coming from the bench since so many people were skeptical of the bench and criticizing the bench, rightfully so. It's amazing that the bench is kind of becoming a difference maker in this series right now compared to Minnesota's, who everyone is talking about how deep, how they have had more depth. So what do you think about that and the sustainability of this and how real or fake it is?
It's tough. I was really surprised when I checked the final stats of the game. The Nuggets shot 57% from the field against the Timberwolves. The 3-point shooting has come back for the team as a whole, but it's strange. Even like through the first round, we had MPJ and Jokic were the only ones who could make threes, and they were both shooting very, very well to combat the rest of the team shooting incredibly poorly. But it was still only enough to give the Nuggets an average of something like 30% from three through against the Lakers in round one. In round two, with the exception of game one, where MPJ was pretty much on fire, I think that Minnesota's done a really good job of not shutting him off necessarily. In game four, he only made two shots, but he only took four. Found that interesting. He was doing a lot more connective passing in this game, but yeah, to get back to your question about the tough shots, what Jokic and Jamal do, it's not that we expect it, but it's like, well, they've been doing this forever, and they're probably going to make at least half of those tough shots. That's just kind of what we expect and what we've seen from them. In terms of the 3-point shooting from the role players, I don't know that it's going to be sustainable at this volume or by those players, but it's kind of like, well, it seems like it's just kind of been shuffling around the team because AG couldn't hit any, like, he couldn't hit the ocean. He couldn't hit anything in round one. And he's shooting like 60% from three against the Wolves right now, through this whole series, actually. And he only hit two threes today, went 100%, but he only had to take two, which I think is interesting because you'd think, given the way that Minnesota is guarding the Nuggets, that they would be forcing more shots to be taken by AG. But I think the Nuggets are doing a good job of moving AG around in offense so that they can't just let Minnesota force them into the one shot that they're willing to live with, which is an AG three. But when he does get them, he's taking them and he's making them. Now, he wasn't making them as much in the first two games, but he's been making them in these last two. So in terms of sustainability, it's just like, I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to look like this, but in terms of the overall production, I can see things shifting around, but you ending up with like the same result, which was the Nuggets finally shooting over 40% from three, which they actually have done in this series. They shot well from three, even in the games that they lost, and a lot of it was role players. but they'd been struggling on the interior, which is why that 57% from the field mark was incredible because it
Hmm.
meant that the Nuggets shot 64% from two against this Minnesota Timberwolves team. Now, a lot of that is Jokic's floaters, but in the last two games, they've been generating more dunks and layups against, a team that has Rudy Gobert on the court than I would have expected with the Nuggets offense clicking the way that it has.
We shot 64% from the field in the first half, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously we had a huge lead going in, not like
Mm-hmm.
massive, but we had a good substantial lead going into the half. Obviously we fell back down to earth a little bit, but it was 48% from the field in the second half. The Wolves ended up winning the second half by score 58-51, but the Nuggets were able to hold on. And I think some of our process and shot making kind of relaxed in that second half
Oh
and in
yeah,
the
for sure.
fourth, just because
Especially at the end of the game because
yeah,
they were just like, we're running clock.
we were just trying to grind it out, and like Jamal maybe force some pocket passes for turnover, stuff like that. But thankfully, it wasn't enough for the Wolves to come back. Yeah, we're lucky that when some of our main dudes aren't producing, that we're getting it in other spots. And it was just a question all year: is CB going to be ready? Is Justin Holiday? Are we going to play him? And what's he going to be like? Matt Moore predicted Justin Holiday was going to have a big series and at least one series, and this is looking like at least one series. If we get out of this series, we'll see how he does in the rest of the playoffs. So it's really cool to see from those guys. I'm super stoked for them. To talk more specifically about Aaron Gordon, man, last game it was just so interesting to watch his positioning versus Gobert's. AG is just so aware of where he is at all times and very smart and decisive on when he's attacking, especially when Rudy Gobert's not on the floor. Like the way he went to the rim aggressively when Gobert was not on the floor in last game was amazing and essential because he could just go to the rim and get some dunks. And then when Rudy Gobert was in, and if he was able to get the ball in the post or get a rebound, he had like a putback dunk over Gobert, which was awesome. So he can look for that. But
Slammed that thing home.
yeah,
He was like, nah, we're scoring here.
yeah. And it's
That
just,
was
man, such a momentum builder. And even like he just knows, oh, I have the ball here and I know Rudy Gobert's right there. So I'm just going to dribble out and take a like step back little mid range jumper, which,
that was an end of clock. That was like a late clock situation too. I thought
mhm,
it was like, okay, that was a good defensive possession by
yeah.
Minnesota, but
So
he
it's
made
just,
that.
yeah, it's so impressive. AG obviously is smart. He's a cerebral player, and he knows if he can turn it on in this matchup with Gobert playing off of him so much, it's going to be a huge difference maker for us. And I don't know if he's just practicing this, if he's doing it in the warm ups, or he's like working on his three and his just mid range jumper. Like, and that's, he's like, knows it's going to be key because it's coming through for us huge right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And he was actually missing a bunch of these middies that they were giving him, even in game three. But he made a couple of turnaround middies, not even the one that we're talking about over Rudy in this game that were sort of we're in the flow. AG's like cutting middle, and that's the shot that's available to them. He just did everything in this game, man. He was bringing the ball up. He was defending Cat really well. He was
Hmm.
defending Ant as well
Yeah.
as one can defend Ant.
It's just a
Uh,
two-way masterpiece.
just he was amazing. There's not enough that you can say about him in those bench minutes. It felt like whenever the offense was running through him, they were getting a good shot, whether he was posting someone up, getting a dunk, or he was facilitating. It was just he was great. He was amazing. He was nearly perfect in this game from the field, and I want to give him and the other ball handlers and initiators for the Nuggets a lot of credit because the amount of ball pressure and the Timberwolves' commitment to ball pressure on every possession after any kind of dead ball situation was incredibly high. Every time the Nuggets were initiating their offense, I'm like, Please don't turn the ball over. And there was a possibility of that happening every time because of how much ball pressure Minnesota was committed to applying. And they handled it so well, especially in the first half as the Nuggets were building their lead. And AG was a big part of that too, because he had Rudy pressuring him at points, he had Cat pressuring him at points, he had Jaden pressuring him at points. I think they had Mike Conley pick him up at certain times, and it's like, well, of course, like AG could cook Mike Conley closer to the basket, but when he's picking up 90 feet, he was, yeah, he did it all. He was amazing, and it's a big reason that the Nuggets were able to just run their offense over the last two games in a way that they really weren't in the first two games of this series, especially in game two.
It's been a really good simple adjustment. I tweeted about how grateful I am that Aaron Gordon spent those years in Orlando where he was the point forward all the time and high usage and taking more shots. And obviously we know he's played like the garbage man backline dunker spot role in the past. It's not like he Orlando completely took those things out of his game, but with it being an emphasis in Denver, it's just really paid off for us. And it seems so like simple. Like I didn't see a lot of people saying when we were struggling in game two and game one with this ball pressure, just have AG bring the ball up, because we've been like, we were so limited with ball handlers. And obviously, it's not like a long term solution. It's not like we're going to have AG bringing it up every game and throughout the regular season. But um, also, that reminds me now that I'm speaking of the regular season, where obviously in the regular season, you're traveling a lot and you have these games packed into the schedule and you don't have time to scout teams necessarily. So you just got to do your base coverages, your base offense a lot of the time, hope that it works. You don't really change a ton of stuff in these matchups. And you just kind of get wins when you can. In the playoffs, you got to adjust, you got to play to your strengths, you got to attack weaknesses on the other team. I think the Nuggets, for whatever reason, were a little late to make these adjustments. Like we knew they were going to have intense ball pressure, but it's not like we went to this AG bringing the ball up from game one. But I expect the Wolves to be a little more disciplined in their help because they were like leaping at any Jokic pivot or attempt, which I get because it's Jokic. I saw even when like Jamal was in the dunker spot, Kat and Rudy were both like guarding him really tight to the baseline, and I'm like, do you realize that's Jamal there? Like, and
They're
they,
like someone said that Rudy in particular has like PTSD from AG
yeah,
finale big them.
it's funny. It's like the habits of guarding the Nuggets, which is smart of them to do, is kind of like just baked in, and they're not really looking at how we're switching it up. So I expect them to try to be a little more disciplined. I just don't know how it's going to play out yet.
Yeah, and there were like two wolves collapsing on KCP in the lane, and I'm like, guys, you just have to live with KCP attempting a layup there. It's going to be contested by the guy who's trailing him. But no, I agree. Like this team is really tough to guard when they're actually running their offense, which they hadn't
Mm-hmm.
been in the first two games of this series. But let's talk a little bit more about the Wolves ball pressure because I talked a lot or a bit about their commitment to ball pressure. Every single dead ball situation you had Cat picking up whoever was initiating, whether it was AG, um, Jamal, obviously, Reggie, Jokic. Who else brought the ball up for the Nuggets at points? Christian had to bring the ball up against Nikhil Alexander Walker at one point in this game, and I'm just like, this watching like this. And I brought up Cat because he would pick up whether it was AG or if it was AG or Jokic. Like whoever was guarding whoever or was in the vicinity needed to pick up whichever Nugget was bringing up the ball. And one of the things I noted was that because the Wolves were often sort of scrambled in whatever matchups they had on offense because of however their offensive possession went that time, they would just have the closest person come and like pick up whoever was bringing up the ball. But because the Nuggets were spreading around these initiation duties, you ended up giving up a lot of cross matches. So you end up in a situation where, like I mentioned earlier, you have Mike Conley picking up AG, or you have Ant picking up Jokic because they are like, we have to have somebody pressuring the ball as they initiate their half court offense. I think that the Wolves gave up a lot more cross matches than they really wanted to. Adam Maris kind of pointed this out, how the Timberwolves are really, really good at guarding Denver in one particular configuration. That's Cat on Jokic, Rudy roaming, probably Jaden on Jamal or Nikhil,
Mhm.
off the bench. And then you kind of move Ant and Conley around between KCP and MPJ, right? Any other configuration leaves, particularly against Denver starters, leaves you incredibly exposed because of all the ways that Jokic can kill you if it's not specifically Cat on him, Rudy roaming. And even then, the Nuggets have figured some things out for that. So I actually think that the ball pressure backfired on them in that respect. I think Adam also pointed out, and I hadn't thought about this, you're applying ball pressure, especially against the primary like point guard on this team. It's Jamal, in large part because you want to tire them out over the course of a game, over the course of the series. But you're also tiring out the defenders who are picking them up full court every possession. One of the reasons that the Sun series was, I wouldn't say difficult, but tricky for the Nuggets, is that Jamal was constantly being picked up full court. Toward the end of the series, the Nuggets finally decided, okay, we're going to do that to Devin Booker too, finally, because we'll at least be able to tire him out. But it does take a lot out of KCP. Bruce Brown did it at times in that series. Christian Brown did it at times in that series, and Jamal. So you don't want to do it every single possession. But the Wolves want to do it every single possession because they're just really committed to this pressure defense. And I think what they were, especially in the second half of the game, they're trying to just apply as much pressure as possible and hopefully force turnovers. But they weren't doing that enough. And I think that the pressure ended up compromising them in more ways than it helped them because of those cross matches, because of the amount of space that they were kind of conceding to the Nuggets offense and making a lot of their defensive rotations longer. Yeah, so what did you think about that?
Yeah, everything you're saying is well put. I had said coming into this, like when we were previewing this series, or I had been questioning coming into this series, the Wolves motor versus the Nuggets. And I knew this was going to be a factor, but I wasn't thinking about it directly in this ball pressure criteria where, because I was thinking more about, running in transition, or a team, because that's going to be an emphasis. Our team's going to get really tired. And I was thinking about, running Rudy and Cat around from the baseline and setting screens and just being relentless on offense and in the half court. I think you're right that it really does take a lot of energy to do this. And the Wolves have even admitted this themselves, that playing
Oh,
this
did
level
they?
of I'm pretty sure Chris Finch or somebody said something about like it's really hard to sustain this level of physicality. I'd have to go back and look at who directly said that, but I think it's a fair point. And even like AG bringing it up, there was a couple times where Jaden was on him too, like you're talking about with these cross matches. So that takes energy for Jaden to do that. Gobert did it a couple times, and so he's out on the perimeter. He gets a foul on AG, so that's just putting him in an uncomfortable spot already. We did a good job scoring when Rudy was on MPJ, which didn't happen a lot, but if you have that kind of a cross match and Rudy's um he's trying to like help and stay home on the perimeter, then the rim's open and that helps us. Yeah, this is just like a question about getting through the entire playoffs and making a finals run, which the Wolves have not done, that I feel like the Nuggets have done and have learned how much energy it really takes to get all the way there. And we saw that in the bubble in 2020, where we had those grueling 7 game series. We had two. And then we play against the Lakers, who are big and pushing Jokic around. And so when Jokic is thinking about how much he had to give to win those two series, about how much it takes to really get there, this series isn't over. So we'll see if the Wolves can pull this off or not. And we'll see how this goes. But I feel good about the Nuggets going forward, or I'm going to this idea of Ant expending all his energy on offense and being tired and looking tired, and then the other dudes who are working really hard on defense spending it all there, and wondering how this energy balance plays out. I think Adam even asked, like, are the Wolves just going to stop doing this ball pressure thing and just like play in the half court and just like give themselves a little bit of a break so that they can put more effort in other areas? I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I will we'll talk a little bit about some of the adjustments that we think the Wolves might make. But in terms of the energy allotment question, I think everything you said is right. I think it was Timpf, who said that every decision you make on a basketball court has a cost, right? And I think you and I talked about this, like, this exact thing in our series preview about the amount of energy that the Wolves might expend maybe too early with the amount of defensive intensity that they were expending through the first two rounds, or at least through round one and the beginning of this series. And I think that this plays into our next topic, which was the role players as well, where at one point in the second half, it seemed like there was a directive to have Jaden take on the primary assignment of picking up whoever was bringing up the ball. So, like we talked about some of the cross matches that the Wolves gave up, particularly in the first half, because every single Wolf was committed to this full court pressure on whoever. But when Jaden was kind of he could have been on the other side of the court. He's coming to pick up whoever's bringing up the ball in the second half. I think they were trying to maybe not give up as many cross matches, although that also meant that you end up in a lot of situations where Jaden is not guarding Jamal if Jamal's not the one bringing the ball up, because he would end up on somebody else. And they weren't forcing a ton of turnovers in those full court pressure situations either. But the other thing that I think it did was really tire them out to a point where they couldn't make their shots. As much energy as the Wolves make the Nuggets expend on both ends of the floor, like you said, they are burning themselves out a little bit too. And I think there were a lot of opportunities for Minnesota as they were trying to make a comeback in this game for these role players to hit momentum shots that were generated either by Cat posting up or Ant collapsing the defense and kicking out to a shooter. Mike Conley generated some looks for others. Mike Conley was on the receiving end of some of those passes too. And each time I was like pissed off that the Nuggets like, no, you like didn't rotate over quick enough. And then it was like a missed three. Nikhil Alexander Walker also was on the other end of some of these receiving passes. So he and Jaden in particular, Mike Conley had some missed threes in this game, although he also made a few. We'll talk about him moving forward in the series as well. But that was in stark contrast to the Nuggets role players, especially Justin Holiday. Reggie made a timely three in this game. He had some timely shots in game three as well. Christian Brown, and of course, Aaron Gordon. And all of those guys, three of them off the bench. It was the bench guys and Aaron Gordon, so the ones who weren't playing as heavy minutes, who maybe weren't taking on like the toughest of defensive assignments necessarily either, with the exception of AG and CB, but again, limited minutes. So they had the legs perhaps to make those shots, whereas the Wolves role players were just kind of missing everything, including in these big, like, okay, the momentum could swing back in your favor, or this is a shot that could help you get back in the game. And that there were a lot of those, especially throughout the second half of game four, where it was like, okay, this game could have looked very different if those guys just had been able to make their shots. So yeah, I do question if Minnesota is going to stay with this commitment to full court pressure, because they basically did it the entire game. I don't think there was a single point all the way through down the stretch where they weren't picking up full court.
I really thought they were gonna really be aggressive on Murray in this game. Thankfully, we have ways of getting him space still, and he looked pretty good. Like with AG bringing the ball up and him not having to do it, because this is taxing bringing the ball up. You wouldn't think it would be, just like watching the game or being a fan. You're like, what? You just dribble, like you just walk up, but it takes a lot of energy to do that. especially now in this Wolves series because we see how they're defending it. It gives Jamal a little bit of a break, I guess I could say. And he can kind of like get a first step off a screen or like when he's going to run into a DHO where he can, get into that action with an explosive step instead of, dribbling where he's already tired and then he's got to do another, burst of energy to get into the offense. So it really helps Jamal out from that standpoint. And I'm wondering about how you feel about the coaching matchup now, where, because when I was looking at, I didn't watch the entire game back, but I was just looking at, some possessions of Mike Conley and some of these other players where a lot of the times they were just going off the dribble and just attacking straight into the defense. And Mike Conley, I get it. Sometimes Jokic was on him, so he was attacking Jokic, which is smart. But Jokic did an amazing job staying with him, and I think he got a block on him in that game. And just like moving his feet and staying with him is really impressive. We hadn't really seen that from Jokic yet in this postseason, putting in that amazing effort. I knew going into this game they were going to really try to attack the paint because they were kind of passive in game three in that regard. So I liked how intensely they moved in the interior and was trying to protect that as much as possible. I think that Wolves can do a little bit more to be a little more creative in getting their looks. So I'm interested to see that. We've seen the Wolves really stay home on Jokic's role, and we hadn't been able to get any space for pocket passes or anything like that. I think it's to Malone's credit that the Nuggets had Christian Brown setting screens on Cat
On Cat,
going
yeah.
into an action so that we can just get a little more space so that Jokic can get more room and Jamal can get more room to pass it to him. And it's just helping us create better looks and up our field goal percentage in the mid range, which has just been going up and up and up with each game, which is very important because it was like 18% from the field in game one. And then I don't know what it was in this game, but it was high. It was like 57% or something crazy. So we got to just keep doing that. We'll see if the Wolves do anything to try and stay more aggressive on that end, but I don't know with how versatile the Nuggets are on offense. I just don't know if they're going to be able to stop him, especially with Jokic. And you know, we know he can figure these things out. And it's funny, like I'm just remembering the Matt Moore tweet where he was like, "Yeah, you can do this thing on Jokic and." You'll figure it out for a half, but then next half he'll figure it out, and then what do you do then? So maybe it took Jokic and everyone, since it's a team effort, more games to figure out the Wolves. Not that not that everything is solved because I think these remaining games are going to be competitive. But
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the Nuggets I had questions about it after game 3, like, okay, what are the Wolves gonna do to counter now that it seems like the Nuggets are a lot more comfortable in their offense? And it's not that they look comfortable in their offense in game 4, but they were still running it, right? Like it was hard for me to say that Minnesota was playing bad defense, but what
yeah,
they were doing wasn't stopping the Nuggets from getting what they wanted for the most part. So it does seem like that Minnesota needs to go back to the drawing board in this respect. Now they made a couple of different adjustments throughout this game, like you mentioned, and then Jokic kind of solved them. One of the big ones was on the empty side pick and rolls or empty side post ups. They started doubling Jokic, and especially on the pick and rolls, they weren't guarding them 2-on-2 anymore. They were guarding them 3-on-2 and forcing Jokic to pass out to the perimeter. And a couple of times that worked. I think it resulted in like a couple of really long skip passes to I remember one was to Reggie in the corner, and then he tried to pass it out, and it resulted in a turnover to Mike Conley. But then as the game went on, because the Jokic was either dribbling away from those doubles and he was scoring, or there was one play where that has been circulating on Twitter where he is dribbling away from the double and then where he's got Rudy on him in the post, draws Cat in help, spinning away from Rudy, and then creates a like wicked passing angle to AG with just a flick of the wrist that kind of like the ball grazes like Cat's head, like Cat's hair, basically, and goes to AG for the dunk. And there were also um, moments where he was passing out to an open shooter, whether they made the shot or not. I think actually the KCP three that initiated the 8-0 run that the Nuggets had to close the quarter was one such pass where he was able to generate a completely wide open shot for KCP using AG's kind of dunker spot gravity. We should actually talk about that 8-0 run because it was a ridiculous sequence of events. After a wild sequence of like bumbling basketball from both teams, I mean, like everyone was trying to make these home run plays in transition and getting blocked or turning the ball over. There were bodies all over the floor, and this is in the last 2 minutes of the second quarter. So we're trying to close out the half. Nuggets go down. They run their offense. Jokic is able to draw the double and kick the ball out to KCP for a wide open three, which he finally made. He missed a lot of wide open shots in this game, but
I know.
he hit some big ones in very key moments as well. Ant goes down. Wolves are supposed to have the final shot. He kind of gets into a pick and roll with Rudy, but AG is guarding him. I think AG is actually the one who helped to force the turnover because he sort of angles it in such a way that Ant has to snake the pick and roll, but like Rudy's not really in position for it. So the paint's super clogged. And then Jokic gets a hand on a ball, gets the steal, and then MPJ is leaking out. And for the cherry pick, he gets the dunk on the other end. So now the Wolves have given up 5 points in a row to close the quarter. Then they quickly inbound the ball, and it goes so far that Jamal catches the ball and doesn't have a full gather step. 50-foot heave, and it splashes after the buzzer to close the half to bring the Nuggets lead back to 15. That was an insane sequence. The whole last 3 minutes of that quarter was absolute
It's
chaos.
crazy. Yeah, as a Nuggets fan, I was looking at that Jamal half court heave or beyond half court heave and just thinking about if we can just go all the way and repeat, like let's just hypothetical, have some fun and just think back to like some of the moments in this series and just marvel at it and
just Jamal being ridiculous.
Just like these tough shots from Jamal. He's just one of the best there is at it. And I don't know if this was going around on Twitter or if anyone else had mentioned this, but like you said, like he didn't get like a full
It was 2 steps, and it wasn't the wrong foot because it was off his left foot. I checked like 3
yeah.
times to make sure.
But that's the foot where
But like
that
he
he has
barely
the calf
looked. He was
strain.
just like, "Well, here we go." That's right. Oh my gosh, it's a
So it
left
was like
calf
he did
strain.
that off of his bad leg and it went in. So it's kind of
Oh
maybe
my
some
god.
signs of optimism. The fact that he did that on that leg and shot it that far and it went in, that was insane. I don't even know what to think about that. Like,
That was
I feel like a lot of that game, I was kind of in a daze. Like, I don't even know what to think about this. This is
you don't even
just
know what to
this is
say.
just
There
so
were a lot
fun.
of tough shots by the Nuggets. Now,
Hmm.
it's not that the Wolves didn't have tough shots. I think that a lot of the shots that they got were good. Like Ant was like driving in and getting everything he wanted. My thing is like Ant's pull-up game
It's just pull
kept the
ups,
Wolves
man.
in this. Like he was just not missing. Like
Yeah.
he hit like 3 threes when the Wolves were trying to make a run to close the gap in the first half. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like this kid is gonna obliterate this lead that AG
Hmm.
worked so hard to create.
Yeah, I
uh,
think.
he's amazing. I know like there are lots of players that I love to hate on that are just good against our team, but there are certain players where I just have to admire their greatness. Even when the Nuggets were getting their asses kicked in games 1 and 2, I was just like, this is Ant, like Ant is killing us. And the Nuggets weren't playing well. Um, but there's something about like Ant and TJ McConnell where I'm like, man, you could
Yeah,
be cooking us, but I
so
can't
fun.
hate you specifically on like that
I,
one
I
part.
I'm ready to. This is kind of I don't know if I should say this, but whatever. Like
Go
I'm
ahead,
ready
do it.
to like Ant as soon as he's just like not playing the Nuggets. I'll be like, hey, this is cool. Like good for you,
Yeah,
Ant. But right now I'm like, God. Like
yeah.
I accept he might score 40 points every game for the rest of this series because He can score from any spot on the floor in any way,
And
off the
he's so
dribble,
hard to
pull
stop
up,
from getting to the rim. That's the thing
just
is like
driving it.
he'll get he'll get like 25 points on like layups and free throws on us if we're not collapsing
Hmm.
on him
Yeah,
every single game is the thing. And then
yeah,
his that completely unlocks his pull-up game and also
yeah.
potential assists.
And
I
the
do
yeah,
think that the Nuggets did a better job of forcing Ant to make decisions and getting off the ball
that's
faster.
just what I was gonna say. Yeah,
And that's really important because we can't stop him,
yeah.
but we can try to stop the others.
It's not a matter of, hey, just let Ant do his thing because we can't stop him. It's you really have to make it as tough as possible, including bringing multiple defenders and making the read so clear to him that he has to do it because I just want the ball in anyone
I
else's hands in the
know, because
Wolves.
he was like splitting defenders too, and
Yeah,
there were some like soft doubles and like soft traps, and I'm like, what is this soft shit? He's just gonna drive right around both of you and get to the rim. Okay, you need
yeah.
to make him give up the ball.
So
He is that good. I think
I'm.
there was something really I just wanted to point this out because I completely agree with Jason Timpf, who was sort of contrasting Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum. I think that Jason Tatum's still an overall better player right now, although Ant has been way better than him in the playoffs. But there is a difference between being a great athlete and being a top tier athlete by NBA standards. And Ant is that. Like with Tatum, I'm like, we can maybe stop him and like slow him down a bit with like AG, Peyton Watson. With Ant, we're just like, we need to go we need to go to some special rules for this kid, okay? Because
Hmm.
he is too big, too strong, too quick of a first step. Like he's got all of the things. It's like compact LeBron that's twitchy and has a good pull-up jump shot. Now, LeBron, he's like a fucking tank, right? Like he's finishing through like all the contact. I think that AG in particular, because he's so strong in CB2, we're able to stifle him a little bit inside, way more so than either of those guys could have done with like LeBron, for example, who is way bigger than Ant, right? But in terms of just encapsulating all of the things that you need to be able to score on not just us, but any team on a given possession. Like he has those things. So the only thing that we can do, and it depends on, time and score, right? So toward the end of the game, you might want to give Ant the pull up middies because you don't want to open up the 3 point line. I think Jamal
Hmm.
talked about this toward the end of the game. But as you're building your lead and Ant is just on a freaking heater, and maybe they're starting to go on a run and you don't want to give up your lead, you're like, okay, we need to like take some chances here and make him give up the ball, force him to make a play. And I also think with both him and Conley, the Nuggets were able to make some really um, and great anticipatory plays on defense too. Just steals where I'm like, oh man, he's about to kick out to that open corner shooter, and then like MPJ just like catches it right on the way, and I'm like, oh, where did he come from? And then you remember MPJ is 6'10" with like a
Hmm.
7'4" standing reach or whatever, so like he can just like come out of nowhere and grab that. Like we're a big
Yeah,
lengthy team as well, and we can
yeah.
make those kinds of plays too. But yeah, like Ant is just he's that special. Like I think especially offensively, like this Wolves team is so challenged. Like this game could have been another blowout, like in game 3. But like Ant said after game 3, he wasn't as aggressive in that game. I do think that the Nuggets did some good things defensively, but I agree with him that he wasn't as aggressive in that game. And
Hmm.
Cat shot even worse in this game, but it was closer because Ant decided to take things
Just
over
going
and say
off.
like, nope, we're gonna hang in there and keep fighting in this game. And so he's definitely someone that I'm scared of still heading into game 5. And so is Mike Conley because I don't think that he's had an amazing game in a while. Like I think he was really great for them in game 1, but in the game since he's been pretty muted. And like I said, he was one of the players that missed some momentum shots in this game, but he also had moments that showed you why you as a Nuggets fan should be wary of him because he came out in that third quarter. And as I predicted at halftime, like he's going to come in and settle the offense. It was a lot of Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. I think Rudy was involved in something like 80% of the plays that ended up in shots that kept the Timberwolves in this game in that second half, whether it was through screening for Ant, screening for Mike Conley, offensive rebound putbacks. Like I actually think that people that are blaming Rudy for his contributions on either end of the ball in this game are just like dead wrong. Like the problem for the Wolves in this game was more their offense, because I don't think their defense is something that they can that the players can fix right now without going to the drawing board, because I think that the Nuggets have just had thrown so many counters offensively to them. But their offense is where there's still meat left on the bone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Rudy was contributing to that by making plays for others, whether it was like those offensive rebound putbacks or particularly those screens. Like he set a couple of Gortat screens in that game that created like clear ass driving lanes for Ant, for Cat. And he's always that great outlet for that release valve for Mike Conley as well. That I like. I think he actually finished the game with a positive plus minus. He was a team high +9 for the Timberwolves yesterday, actually.
I know there's a lot of discourse going around it. I was joking with someone where I was saying if we get back into this series and we win these two games, is there going to be talk of benching Rudy since they played their best game against us without him? But don't get caught in that trap, because when Rudy's not on the floor, like we're destroying them too, maybe even worse. So
Finch did try the in game 3, he did try the no Rudy lineup to close that first half because they were trying to just get some scoring going. The game was going to get really out of hand, and it did eventually, but the Nuggets were up something like 18. They were able to cut it to like 14 at half, or 15 at
mhm,
half or something, with a Cat Nas front court.
mhm,
But in the second half, it just, and the thing with Nas in particular is that the Nuggets were attacking him defensively in some very particular ways in this game. I think toward the end of game 3, especially, Jokic just figured out how to go at Nas one on one. But in game 4, they actually attacked Nas in pick and roll a lot too. And it's not like Nas can't guard pick and roll, especially as the big, but his positioning and communication isn't quite there because he's not usually playing the 5. Even in those
mhm.
backup minutes, he's usually playing with Cat off the bench, or
Mhm.
Rudy, even in the regular season.
Yeah, playing with
So
Rudy because Cat had been out.
yeah, like Nas does play more like a wing, and that, like, the Nuggets are just so good at putting defenders in positions to guard things that they don't normally guard.
Mhm.
Something that's so amazing about this team.
Yeah.
This is
I- In
this
game
episode is a celebration of the Nuggets.
Yeah. In game 3, Nas and Cat had like the same exact time minutes wise guarding Jokic, which I thought was
Oh,
interesting
interesting.
because I think Cat should be taking that matchup way more than Nas,
Yeah.
at least at this point, because now he's getting destroyed. So yeah, they as much as people are saying,
Well, didn't Cat get in some foul trouble in game 3?
yeah,
Maybe
maybe
that's
that's
why.
why. That's why.
He
Yeah, you're
was
right.
actually pretty good about that in this game. He finished the game with 3 fouls.
He only had a
Um,
couple bad, and a lot of those fouls were like you didn't have to do that. So we'll see if he cleans that up.
well,
But
that's like all of Cat's fouls.
yeah, I still think he's gonna clean it up. I'm like, don't rely on Cat getting in foul trouble all the
Yeah,
time. But
yeah.
with the Suns Wolves series, I was shocked at the difference of depth from the Wolves to the Suns. It was like night and day. With this one, I thought it was also going to be tough, but so far, the Nuggets bench is just answering the call, and the Wolves role players have not had a good showing the last two games. So, I mean, Conley came out and hit his first three, and I was like, oh, this might be a huge Conley game, and then he kind of fizzled out, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just with Ant dominating the ball. I mean, it's their best look, but I don't know if it's like he needs to be trying to get the others going before he's like being super aggressive. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is. I just think back to like LeBron going to 8 straight finals and how much he grew in learning how to dole out his shot diet and how and when he expends his energy. And I think obviously this is a huge matchup for the Wolves. If they can beat the Nuggets, they could win the title. So I kind of
Yep.
get why they're like going balls to the wall and really being aggressive. But Cat might have a rough game in these last 3 games because he's putting a lot of energy into it. And so, I mean, I'm hoping he has a bad game just so we can get one. But if he scores
You mean
40 every
Ant?
game, yeah, Ant. If Ant scores 40 every game, I wouldn't be surprised. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he had like a 19-point game where he just was like not having it. But right now he's shooting so good. If he just like shoots it, it's like going in. So I don't know. Like,
Yeah. Like
yeah,
I'm shocked every time they force miss. I'm like, oh my god, please get the rebound.
I know. And
And
then there
Rudy
was
got some
one
of the
time,
got
yeah, I
Rudy and
got that
Cat
put
both
back.
were like really good on the glass in this game.
Yeah.
That's another thing I wanted to point out because I had my whole small ball rant. You guys can go check out the clips. And I also the small ball issue that I have is somewhat related to teams that try to go to 5 out offense, but they're usually tied. The Nuggets have been going 5 out without necessarily going small, at least with their starting lineup. Most benches are small anyway, because that's just how it goes. There are only a couple teams in the league that go big with their bench, or let alone double big with their bench, like say the Orlando Magic or the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the Bulls are another. But when I talk about it, I'm mostly talking about starting lineups. In this game, the Nuggets got like completely destroyed on the glass. Their defensive rebounding percentage was 66.7, which would have been the worst in the league if that was their
Wow.
regular season average. And they weren't getting a lot of offensive rebounds either, because the Wolves were very good about cleaning up the glass. I mean, they dominated the defensive glass. The Nuggets were getting one shot and one shot only.
Yeah.
So they had to generate good shots. I think that's something that was true in the first 2 games as well. So despite the Nuggets going with some different alignments, especially with AG playing more on the interior in those first 2 games, the Wolves were still getting all the defensive rebounds. So it was like, well, he's muted his impact in terms of being able to offensive rebound Jokic too, because the Wolves are collapsing on them. I do think one of the things that the Nuggets did that we pointed out last episode in Game 3 is, when Rudy tries to like break up a lob, AG's tapping it back out. In this game, there was a lot more of AG just knows automatically they're about to collapse on me if he does get an offensive rebound. So he's kicking it out to usually an open shooter because everyone else is spread apart so much, just because of how they're aligned on offense. And it's not just that the Wolves are such a big team, good defensive rebounding team, that they're getting all these rebounds, but also because of the way that the Nuggets are aligning themselves on offense to give them as much space as possible. I do think there are a lot of benefits offensively to 4 out, 1 in, but against the Wolves, and specifically against the Wolves, the way that they like to defend the Nuggets, 5 out and using a lot more delay type actions where Jokic or AG in those bench minutes are just controlling the handoff game have been a lot more advantageous for the Nuggets in this matchup, in most of the actions that they run that aren't Jokic Murray pick and roll. I wouldn't be super surprised if they just started to do a lot of funky, like aggressive switching, for example, especially in the non Jokic minutes. Now, Jokic and AG can attack mismatches like that. Jamal can to a degree. Maybe they don't worry about that as much and they force Jamal to keep making tough shots, because even though you don't want to leave your guys in ISO against Jamal with the pull-up game, he's probably not going to get all the way to the rim on them. And even when he
Hmm.
does, like they can contest that really well from the rear, right? So that's something that I kind of expect to see more of, just because I think they have to just try some shit right now because it seems like the Nuggets are comfortable enough getting into their offense against this Minnesota half court defense the way that they are currently set up.
Hmm. I know it's kind of interesting that it's come to this where it seemed like the defense had it like, you know, the defense was playing comfortably and the Nuggets were struggling to score. So they're like, "Hey, our defense is our strength. We're going to we're gonna hold them to under 100, and then our offense is gonna be good enough that we're gonna win these games. But now it's flipped where you know they got to figure some stuff out on the offensive end and the defensive end, and the Nuggets just got to keep playing aggressive D. I do think Cat is going to try to be more involved. I think he's going to try to have more success on MPJ and post ups and going to the rim because he was doing pretty good. And that matchup just didn't go to a ton. And I think he'll continue to try an offensive rebound because he was doing really well getting points off of that. So the Nuggets are going to have to look out for that too. I just like, yeah, I think the Wolves are going to have to be more creative in the half court offense and let Conley operate a little bit more out of some actions rather than him just like driving in and rather than Ant just like doing pull ups. But if they want to win that way, just like with Ant pulling up, like good luck to you, I guess. But yeah, on
Unless
the
we pull
def,
you up in the mid range and we can just
yeah,
kind of play
run
the
him off a
math
three.
game and hope he misses some of them. I do think that the Nuggets punish some of their scram switching though too. Like there
Yeah.
was a possession I recall. I can't remember who was on KCP, but Slow-Mo was trying to recover to Jokic on a pick and roll. Jamal gets Jokic the ball on the pocket pass, and then KCP, whoever was on him, was trying to scram off of him and get either back to Jokic or back to whoever was one pass away from Jokic. And Jokic immediately found him for like the pull up midi. I think KCP was literally like on his way to relocate to the other 3 point line to punish the fact that they were trying to scram after they'd given up this cross match. Another problem with this full court pressure, right? And then he just like pulls up for an open baseline midi that I think it was Nikhil had to contest late,
Hmm.
um, because he was trying to recover back to KCP. And it's just one of those things where, like, I remember seeing that in the Lakers series last year. I remember game 4 happening where I think the Lakers they picked up AG. He was initiating. They picked up AG with Schroeder. And AG gives Jokic the ball and immediately cuts, and Schroeder tries to come to double to Jokic. But then because of AG's cut, Jokic is able to find him easily. And Austin Reeves tries to recover to AG to kind of like, oh, we're supposed to be rotating here. Finds AG on the cut and one dunk, right? And then there was another possession. I think that was the possession that came right after the ridiculous three, that the moonball three in game 4 over 80 last year, because on that possession, the Nuggets had forced a switch of Schroeder onto Jokic because Schroeder was on Jamal and the Lakers were switching. The Lakers scrammed Schroeder out on the backside to get 80 back on Jokic. And Jokic was like, okay, I don't have like quite the post mismatch anymore. And 80 was like kind of pressing up on him. So it wasn't going to be as easy to just kind of back him down, especially late shot clock. So that's what resulted in Jokic dribbling back out and coming in for the Sombor sling, as it's now known, in that shot. And then the next possession down, Jokic, I was like, okay, they're scramming everything now. So I
Hmm.
know it's basically like an interior hedge, and you can punish that by making that quick pass. And especially if it's AD trying to recover back to Jokic, you've pulled the rim protector away from the rim, and you've got someone trying to recover to someone who's now like in the dunker spot, basically. That happened in this game against the Wolves, but it was like KCP baseline midi. Yeah,
Yeah, it's the tough
there was
part
a lot.
with the Wolves defense and the way it's configured. It's like you were saying earlier, where they're good at defending in a certain configuration, but when you're putting them in uncomfortable spots, there's definitely ways to attack it. And so it's been impressive seeing the Nuggets do that. Nuggets could look for like punishing those scram switches more because I feel like they're going to try to stay home with their favorable matchups on defense. So, um, yeah, should we go to mailbag?
Let's do it. Let's go to our mailbag segment. So, to celebrate 1 month of our podiversary, we got to celebrate this Nuggets W over the Wolves, which is funny because I believe our first episode was after the Nuggets won game 80 against the Wolves in the regular season as well.
Hmm.
But we asked the listeners to send us some questions. First, softball. Will, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is black. If I could, I would wear all black every day, a black shirt and black pants or whatever, and just be like a little goth.
I was
But
just thinking that too, because I'm like, oh man, every time I come to the show, it feels like we're both wearing a black t-shirt. So let me try something different today.
that's what I was
Uh,
thinking. That's why I wore my Chelsea jersey.
and that's why I wear this red. But you'll probably see both of us in black pretty often.
Hmm.
My favorite color is actually cerulean in particular, but blue generally. I love cerulean ever since Pokemon, Cerulean City. Love that name. Wish it was a real place, but I love that shade of blue. Okay, so which has been the most exciting series of the playoffs this series and why? This comes from El Boogie 808, by the way. And the color question came from Beanie Cap on Twitter.
Yay, El Boogie, my bestie, as we joke to each other. I mean, if we end up winning this one, this one will be my favorite. But since we had such bad games in the first two, I'm gonna say the Knicks Sixers was probably my favorite, just because it was fun to watch, like all those close games and down to the wire, and some crazy shot making at the end. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, I got to be basic and say Knicks Sixers as well. As much as I hate Philly, I love watching their downfall. So, and I do like that Knicks team. It's really unfortunate about their just like continuing
Hmm.
like extending injury struggles throughout the playoffs. But I would really love to see them have a run with a fully healthy roster next year because I think they could be really formidable in the East. But yeah,
Hmm.
that series was absolutely bonkers, and I wouldn't have said it if the Knicks hadn't won, but they did. So those games
Yeah,
were
exactly.
exciting.
We had been I mean, we covered like a majority of the Knicks games in this postseason. We don't do every game, but I mean, we touch on a lot of them. But the Knicks has been games that I feel like we've had to talk about. But last game, they got blown out really badly by the Pacers, and I don't know that they're going to survive this series now with the injuries. So that is very sad for them. But it's been
Yeah.
fun watching them.
Okay. This one from Mile High Hockey. Love Mile High Hockey.
My Chelsea
Probably
brother.
my favorite Twitter account. What is your favorite play, possession, or shot of the playoffs so far? Could be Nuggets series or not.
Oh God, I should have prepared for this and gone and thought about that. Wait, did KCP have was KCP's transition dunk that was like awesome? Was that versus the Lakers? Like we had a huge comeback and was that in the playoffs where KCP had
That
that
was
awesome
that was the
transition
KCB
dunk?
transition dunk. Yeah, that was a
Because
momentum shifter in that third quarter. I think it was in game two.
I think then that's what I would say because I just did not expect KCP to throw it down like that, and that like gave the
Neither
Nuggets
did I think Torian Prince
so
was the
much
one trailing him
energy.
on that play.
Oh, was it? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an awesome play. I loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, the crowd needed some energy. I think my favorite has to be the game two AG saving, I don't know, saving the ball from out
Oh
of bounds. I think
yeah,
Jokic was trying to pass it to him and he caught it and then caught it to MPJ and MPJ hitting that three. That was the sequence of the playoffs because we don't win that game if that we probably don't win that game if MPJ isn't given the opportunity to tie the game after that like Jamal had that bad turnover or LeBron had that brilliant steal for the transition dunk, and then that just these sequences that happen during these very chaotic moments are always
I know.
very wild, right? And
This
I'm
is
sure like the Knicks would like a Knicks fan would say the same thing about the
yeah.
sequence that led to the DiVincenzo three to give them the lead in game two as well. Crazy game
Hmm.
twos. All right, next. What are the downstream effects of AG bringing the ball up the court? I felt like it threw the defense completely out of sorts at times. Now, we talked about this a little. We talked about this a lot actually. I think that um, this is from Big Honey Z was more applicable in game three. I think that the Wolves were thrown by it, even though it was like the most obvious adjustment in the world. And I wish the Nuggets had gone to it since game one, really, because it was obvious
Hmm.
with Rudy guarding EG. And it's something that we've done in other series where they try to put a rumor on AG and pressure Jamal and all of that stuff. In game four, I don't think that the Wolves are thrown by it because they saw it again throughout game three and went with this whole like we're pressuring literally everybody. They weren't pressuring AG as much in game three, and now they were a lot more in game four and pressuring everybody else as well. So I wouldn't say that they were thrown by it, but I would say that unwavering commitment to ball pressure put them in some compromising positions, like we talked about.
Yeah, it's funny. We hear a lot of talk about how the Wolves were constructed specifically to stop the Nuggets because they have these two. They have the big bodies in Cat and Rudy, so they have incredible interior defense. But we have a point center and a point forward with AG and Jokic. So I just had confidence in their ability to beat them in this matchup. I knew they were going to roam off AG, but I still have not put a ton of stock into that just because, I mean, we saw what happened in game 4. AG made him pay, but it just from the outset puts them in a tough decision. Yeah, it's like you said, like, did it throw them? Whatever, that's fine. But it makes them have to choose because they don't want to have Rudy out on the perimeter. They want him
Nope.
in roaming in the paint. So just from the outset, that puts them in a weird spot that they're not super comfortable with because their success on the defensive end has to come from Rudy being in the interior. Otherwise, they're just kind of not as formidable.
It's interesting because we talked a bit about how the playoffs are about overcoming the situations that make you uncomfortable, and I think we were more talking about it offensively, but defensively as well. Like you talked about how in the regular season you play your base schemes on defense especially, and you just run your normal offense. But in the playoffs, you do have to mix things up and be a bit more versatile in at least what you can execute competently, let alone be effective at the things that you do that deviate from your baseline. And I think it's not that the Wolves can't be competent at doing other things. Like we saw them mix things up a lot, especially against the Phoenix Suns, which is why I'm still expecting some more wrinkles to be thrown by them at the Nuggets. Like some aggressive switching, some zone, whatever it is that they try to go to. But the Nuggets are much better equipped than the Phoenix Suns were at
Yeah, it's
exploiting and figuring those things out. And so hopefully that does win out and they're able to win this series. But Minnesota's definitely not out of it, especially if they can, figure
yeah,
out how to be as effective. Basically have to be as effective defensively in other coverages as they are in what they, like to go to, especially against this Nuggets team.
Yeah,
Um,
I real quick, since I may
yeah.
not have another chance to talk about this with the other games coming up, and I don't know how they're going to go, but I do trust in the Nuggets' ability to be versatile and solve these problems and give more looks and solve more looks from the Wolves than the Wolves do. So I feel bad that a bunch of people kind of picked the Wolves after the first two games, but how can you not after what we saw? So, but right now I'm feeling really good and I
You
think we're
feel
gonna
bad
win.
that a bunch of people, including us, picked the
Yeah,
Wolves after the
including
first
us.
few games.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel bad. It's just like I feel great that they're proving me wrong. So
yeah,
at least
exactly.
so far.
Yes,
Game 5 is gonna be crazy, I think, and it's gonna be really intense from both teams because it's a chance for the Nuggets to finally lead in this series. And the Wolves don't want to go down 3-2. So,
hmm
or
hmm
2-3 rather. All right, we got a question from NBA Chicken who says, what position do
Yay.
you think should be prioritized this offseason? A backup point guard or a center?
I would say point guard. I feel like we've been able to get by on not having a better backup center for so long that we're getting used to it. But we have Aaron Gordon to play backup center in important minutes. Obviously, in the regular season, it really sucks to bring Jokic off the floor and we don't have that good backup big. But um, I just like, I think the issues we're having with having fewer ball handlers, especially with how the first two games of the series went and what we saw with having less ball handlers did, I think it's like a glaring need at this point to get some more ball handlers and creators and such. But I don't know.
Creation, I think, is important, but I would actually prioritize backup center over backup point guard. I think we have some things in the pipeline in terms of creation and ball handling right now with between Julian and Pickett, especially, right? We gave Collins some minutes this season. I don't think that he's going to be one of our two-way contracts next year because Calvin is probably going to want to force Malone's hand at playing Jalen Pickett, who really didn't get much opportunity at all this year. And I think that having a backup center to save AG more than any is more important than
Mhm.
not that it's more important than saving Jamal, but we have some other things that we can put there. If we actually got a backup center who had any kind of passing ability, then we can sort of replicate with the bench the play style of the starters, or just someone who can screen really, because we don't have like the basic big functions off the bench in any lineup. So I would actually prioritize backup center over a backup point guard in particular, just because I think that we have some other options there, even if they're not great. We have them. We don't have another real option at backup center. Zeke is not a backup center, and we can't, like, DeAndre Jordan is not playing a ton more NBA minutes. And so I would differ from you there. All
Cool.
right, next question is from Isle of Dog. My take that everyone hates. Jamal is a natural shooting guard and should be played there. Nugs should get a more traditional point guard to play alongside him. Jokic has talked about how much he loves playing with that type. L take or no?
I'll let
That's
you take
interesting.
this. You love him.
Oh yeah, I
What
love
do you think?
Jamal.
What do you got?
I I don't think that like Jamal is like the best at natural point guard stuff of anybody in the NBA, but I love him as a combo guard. The advantage to having him at that position, especially given his size, is massive because it allows the Nuggets to be plus sized at every position. Like, can you imagine the Wolves if it was an Ant at point guard? He's not as good of a passer as Jamal, for example, but it opens up more opportunities for more positionless play, basically, especially if everyone on the floor can screen and such. It is helpful to have another one on the floor who can handle the ball a little bit more. That's not really KCP's strength, but he's such a
Mhm.
great defensive fit that uh, that's what you would want there. If we had a point guard playing, it would we would have three guard lineups all the time. Now, in those bench minutes, I actually think it would be helpful to have a point guard because those benches are small anyway. And Jamal's a fine size too for those bench minutes, especially since we're playing switch all. I wouldn't want a smaller point guard, but someone like, Jalen Pickett's not huge, but whatever. If he was playing that position, it would allow Jamal to play more off the ball and really unlock his scoring. That was his primary position when he played in college, and he was an absolute flamethrower there. And we've seen how much getting him off the ball has been able to unlock him in the playoffs, especially. And we saw it last year when you had Bruce handling primarily off the bench. So I don't think that you need a point guard necessarily, but just someone else that you can trust to initiate. And I don't know that prioritizing even a TJ McConnell type, who I would love to have on this team, over a backup center, as we just talked about, is the way to go because we have some other options in that pipeline. We're also probably going to see some more growth in that area from Julian, from Peyton, from Christian, and so I wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily prioritize a point guard. Definitely not with the starters, and probably not with the bench.
Yeah.
Next, we have just two more questions, I believe. I'll check the other thread just to make sure. What counter adjustments do you think Minnesota will make coming into Game 5, and how do you expect the Nuggets will respond?
I think they're going to do on offense, they're going to try to find ways to get Cat going because not that they want the ball to be out of Ant's hands, but I feel like Ant will do what he does regardless. It's just, I mean, Cat has had some really bad games.
And
You know,
Ant
they're
was also a little bit gassed by the end of that game too.
yeah. So yeah, if he wasn't gas and if he got 50 or 55 or something, would that be enough to win? So I think on the offensive end, something to do with Cat. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I think it's going to be him scoring in the interior, hopefully against like mismatch matches like Jamal or MPJ or something like that. So
Yeah, we got away with
yeah,
KCP on him a bit much, and I don't think that Minnesota's going to allow that. It's kind of like in the Lakers series when we started putting KCP on LeBron, and I'm like, man, they spent like 2 games letting us get away with that, but then LeBron started really punishing that. consistently over the last two games of that series. The offensive stuff is easier to predict than the defensive stuff. I think that
Hmm.
there's more that Minnesota can do, but in terms of how I expect the Nuggets to respond, I mean, defensively, I think that Ant is still going to be the kind of primary like attention point, and they'll probably kind of adjust things based on how the game is going. I think that for the most part, they've been okay with Ant going off as long as others aren't getting going. They're hard doubling both Ant and Cat in the post a lot, so they're not letting them be as like deliberate in their side, their like mismatch attacking as either of them would like to be. I think in terms of how the Nuggets are going to respond to the Wolves being more aggressive with especially Cat in the interior, I'm sure Ant is also going to be, is that they're going to be a lot more aggressive in doubling those guys. I don't like the idea of leaving it up to shot variance on these role players. The Wolves role players have been pretty cold in the last couple of games, but we don't want to give them a chance to get hot. So when it comes to these aggressive coverages, I want us to be equally aggressive in rotating out or making sure when you're doubling, getting the ball out of their hands. Ideally, you're just like getting the ball in that situation and really forcing them to make really difficult passes and hopefully turning the ball over.
Yeah.
So, okay, next question. And I think this is the last question. How do you guys think Maul's leg holds up? Oh, this is from Jonavan Jangle. How do you guys think Maul's leg holds up with these short rest days? Do you think he's adjusted the past few days or just been better?
I don't know. It's probably a mix of both because he's talked about how he's going to need to adjust with it. I think giving him some relief in bringing the ball up is good for his calf. I think obviously he looked the best he's looked coming off of that rest period and coming into game three. He looked super fresh and explosive in ways that we hadn't seen in a bit. I think so. I would rather him have more rest, but I think like Jokic and other players prefer this every other day rhythm. They like that. So yeah, it's just you kind of have to take what you can from these shorter rests and be happy with it and hope that Jabal can just hang on. I mean, I'm a little worried. It's like after every game, he's like, oh, it was tightening up there. He was like kind of not looking so good at the end of game three and game four, but we still won those games pretty convincingly. I mean, it was still like it was getting closer towards the end of game four, but it's a good sign that we are looking this good despite his calf. And I mean, that half court shot he hit one leg on his calf. We talked about it earlier in the episode. I'm hoping that's a good sign, but it's just so hard to predict. I have no idea how he feels.
Yeah, I think I'm just worried about it getting worse. I think that he's mostly been fine, especially the last two games since they had a bit of a longer rest in the middle of the series. I don't know, just gotta trust the medical and training staff on that. And he has tightened up toward the ends of these games, and I think it's fine as long as he's not pressing. Like I don't want to see any more of Jamal trying to take Ant in isolation, either in the post or facing up, driving on him in late third quarter situations. And on the one that Ant blocked, I think Ant probably would have blocked it anyway because he's a ridiculous athlete. But Jamal also didn't get a ton of height going into that layup. He also didn't have like a ton of like runway going into that, so it's not like he could have. I think he was kind of almost walking into the shot. But yeah, as long as he can play facilitator still, I feel okay about it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to watch. And like this series is by no means over, and it's not just because the Wolves can maybe win a little bit more on the margins defensively, but offensively, they still give us a ton of trouble. I do think that our defense has been getting better as the series has gone on, even though
Hmm.
we couldn't stop anybody yesterday. A large part of it is just like, let's not turn the ball over and give them everything in transition.
Yeah, we really
That
have to.
worked for the last two games. Let's just keep that up at least. Just give ourselves a chance, and then hopefully it doesn't become a clutch game, and then we have to kind of pray for Jamal's calf to hold up with in those shot making situations.
Hmm.
Although we did see it when his calf was probably at its worst in Game 5 against the Lakers after he'd had a terrible series and he was still
Hmm.
hitting game winners over them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something to watch for sure.
It's hard to imagine it completely healing as we go on, just because he's playing a lot of minutes. These are grueling games, but I mean, he's kind of been technically improving as this has gone on. So I'm hoping it's either he's getting used to playing how he needs to play with this injury, and or it is getting better. So without saying a cop out kind of answer or just honest answer of like we have no idea, I believe he's getting better and he's going to look even better as the playoffs go on. I'm just going to say it straight up, put it out there, and hope it happens. I am a little bit worried. I mean, he had some stupid passes and just bad turnovers at the end of the game, so I need that to stop. But can Jamal just hit a floater ever?
Oh my
Please,
gosh.
just please hit a floater. Like, so much of our problems would just be solved if he could just, even in the Lakers series, in this series, just hit a freaking floater, man.
Yeah, the floater game is very weak with that one. He can only hit the tough shots.
I know it's
Like
like the weird jump
I think he
shots. I
had
don't know.
7 points at half, and I'm like, what? It felt like 15 because every shot he hit was tough. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's been weird. I don't know if it's because his legs are weakened, so on his jump shots he's like really pushing it with his upper body, and then when he needs that nice touch for the floater, it's just gone because he's just used to like chucking it up with his hands and his wrists basically on these shots. I don't know what's going on there, but
Yeah, but that's it for our mailbag. Do you have any final reflections on our first month of the podcast? Well,
I mean, the podcast has been awesome. I appreciate everyone who's listened. I'm glad that more people were exposed to Grace and her takes because it, obviously your face wasn't out there as much. I'm like throwing
or at all,
pictures and
because
stuff
I'm
out in the
Elmo on
timeline.
Twitter.
Yeah, so that's been awesome, and the reception has been awesome. But I will say just that I hope the Nuggets realize what an opportunity this is, because I think that the rest of the league looks fairly open. I mean, the Mavs have some injuries. If they get past OKC, I think the Nuggets can beat them. I think the Nuggets can beat the Celtics if KP's limited. We've already proven we can beat them. And it's just like, if they can realize that they just need to win 2 more games against this Wolves team and just lock in and push through whatever it takes to just get this, because we have Wembenyama and we have Ant and we have these young teams, and the league is getting better and people are going to retool again come this off season. And it's just like, if we can get another one, just 2 in a row, and just get one in this Jokic era in this window, it would just be massive. And I just hope they seize this opportunity that's in front of them and not just, succumb to the exhaustion of trying to repeat and defending the title, because it's definitely a tall order, but I know that they can do it. They just got to realize it.
Yeah, I mean, Will going in full fan planning the legacy mode there, but
Hmm.
I think obviously I think the Nuggets realized their opportunity. My only questions left about the series are really about Minnesota, because it's not like last year when it was 2-2 tied against the Suns. That
Hmm.
was like a you have an opportunity here. It was all about, are the Nuggets going to be able to just get it done? Minnesota has a lot of agency in this as well. They're a very good team. They're a very good defensive team. They have a transcendent superstar right now in Anthony Edwards as he's playing in the playoffs. And if he continues to play like this and their supporting cast steps up, they can still win this series, obviously. I think that the Nuggets are going to continue to play well and hopefully just be able to counter whatever Minnesota throws at them.
Hmm.
And the question is more, is it going to be enough for whatever counterpunch the Wolves are going to throw after the Nuggets were able to, tie this series up? So I'm willing to give a little bit more credit to our enemies. So there's still questions there, but that's what makes it exciting. It's also what gives me like intense sickness before these games. Everyone who followed me on Twitter knows how I felt before game 4. I'm glad they didn't go down 3-1, but I would also really love it if they won game 5 so that they could be the first team to win a home game in this series and give themselves multiple opportunities to close it out. Although it would be great if they just won the next
Hmm.
2 games.
God, we just have a chance to do something really special, like down 0-2. Like, let's say we won 4 in a row and then we went on and we repeated. Oh, God. I'm counting the chickens before they hatch. You better believe it. So,
Will is like, this would just be exquisite.
God, it would just solve so many of my personal
Anxieties.
problems.
Your personal problems. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. It'd be nice to have like just a basking in the glow of everyone complimenting the Nuggets off season again. That was so fun.
And to
That
do
was
it
so fun to
again,
experience
oh,
last
especially
year as a Nuggets fan.
and after like repeating, it would just be even better. But
I
yes,
know. And then we
oh,
could contribute to that dialogue too. It would just
mhm.
be like this never ending circle jerk
Yeah. I mean,
about the Nuggets.
if it doesn't work out the way we want it, at least we put up a really good fight and we won those two away games and we looked more like ourselves. So I'm happy about that too.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Well, thank you, audience, for listening and or watching us make complete fools of ourselves on What's in a Game today. Thanks for listening for the past month. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, leave us a review, help us to keep growing the podcast. We really appreciate everyone who listens and comments and interacts with us on Twitter as well. Have our handles at the bottom of the screen. We're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music, and everyone, please remember, winning is fun and losing sucks.